And welcome to the November 15th, 2022 regular and work session meetings of the Pinehurst Village Council. We have an active agenda tonight. We look forward to your participation in the meeting. All council members are here, including our village manager, Jeff Sanborn. If you are listening to this meeting on our live stream and you wish to make any comments to the council on any issue, whether it's on the agenda tonight or not, you may do that by sending an email to the village clerk, which address is, what is the address we're using now? Public comments at vopnc.org. That's public comments, 2 C's, at vopnc.org. Those comments will be received by the village clerk and circulated to members of the council and staff as appropriate. They will not be read at this meeting. For those of you who are here and wish to make comments tonight, there's an opportunity to do that at the last agenda item on the regular meeting. There is a sign-up sheet in the rear of the room. If you wish to make comments on any subject tonight during that time, please sign that list. The village clerk will collect that shortly and bring that to my attention at the end of the meeting. Having called the meeting to order, we'll go to reports from our village manager and other council members on activities over the last couple of weeks. And I will first go to Jeff Sanborn, our village manager. Jeff?
Thank you, John. A couple of things I'd like to comment on. The first is that we have a couple of imminent vacancies coming up in both our Planning and Zoning Board and our HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission. And we don't have a lot of applicants right now. So I'd like to put out the call for anybody out there, whether you're here or listening, or might be listening later on, for applicants for those two boards. They serve very important functions for us. And it's always nice to have applicants come in that have some relevant experience, that have served on similar boards previously, or maybe on an ARB in a private sense. But that's not always possible, and that's okay. Everybody has to start somewhere. From my mind, the perfect applicant is somebody that has an open mind, can think critically, and maintain objectivity. And so if you fit that bill, we certainly welcome the applications. The second thing I'd like to comment on is kind of an update on where we are with implementation of the recently adopted changes to our development ordinance regarding short-term rentals and some other action items that are due out with that effort. Our planning department is just about complete in getting the certificate of nonconformity up and running, working through issues, trying to get that up in our online permitting platform so that that's accessible for folks that want to apply for that certificate. But that should be happening very soon, I think in the next week or so. And then they also have a list of frequently asked questions and answers prepared. And we might actually have that up yet tonight, maybe not, but certainly in the coming days we'll have that up on our website for the public in case they have other questions or concerns about how that system works. And then we had a couple of other due-outs with regards to the short-term rental question that we have told the community that we would be working on in the coming weeks and months. The first is this issue of homestays and how to deal with that. And the second is this issue that recognition that some short-term rentals in some communities that have private restrictions and covenants might be a whole different type of a condition to deal with. And so we're working on new definitional language with regard to that. I think right now we're calling it something like planned community neighborhood rental accommodations or something like that. But the whole idea is that it would be in neighborhoods that have covenants and restrictions and where a rental program is managed by a governing board that answers to the property owners in those communities. I think based on the current planning and zoning workload, It's probably most realistic to expect that that might go to the Planning and Zoning Board for a public hearing in January. I know that sounds like quite a ways in the future, but we are entering the holiday season, and there's not a lot of time to work on other things as well. So, so that's my update on that situation.
Yeah, thank you very much. From my perspective and responsibilities, the Mayor Pro Tem and I met with Partners in Progress at their quarterly meeting last week. I think Councilmember Pizzella will report on that momentarily. But the other things I wish to mention is that I had a very interesting interview with a young man whose name is Mitchell Whitley. He's been in the press a little bit. He is attempting to interview all the mayors in the state of North Carolina. I was 300 and something on his list of completions in an interview we had here at Village Hall about 10 days ago. Very interesting young man, lives in Raleigh, working on some political science degrees and pursuing this agenda of his own to kind of assess what are the critical issues that towns and cities of all sizes face, what are the things that mayors find most challenging, most likable, and a whole series of ideas that he had in his mind. We then took quite a tour of the village of Pinehurst, and he'd only been here once before, but he was very impressed with the way the village looks, the activity level that we have. I reviewed different programs and things with him and how the council works as well, and I expect to get some report from him in about a year's time after he's completed all of his 524 interviews, or as nearly close to that number as he can. But it's always nice to see that sort of interest among our young folks. Mitchell's about 25, 26 years old, and obviously moving on a timeline, I think, to be part of government at some point in the future, which I highly encouraged him to do. Also related to activities in the core village, Councilmember Hogeman and I had a nice tour of the new Heritage Hall at Village Chapel, which was recently concluded, and we had a very nice time looking at that new facility, which is a nice addition not only for them, but in many ways the chapel continues to serve, as the other churches in the village do, serve the greater community with events and activities for people throughout the village of Pinehurst. I also had the opportunity to welcome to town a new shop, new to Pinehurst anyway. We were sorry to see the closure and the retirement of La Femme Chateau, a very fine leather goods shop that had been in Pinehurst for a very long time. However, Monkeys from another town nearby has taken that space and moved in to that shop as well to form a second shop for them, and we welcome them to the village. That concludes my comments, and Pat, maybe we'll go into the things we heard at the Partners in Progress meeting, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I begin that, I think it's worthwhile to recognize we just celebrated as a country Veterans Day, and we happen to have a member of our council who's a graduate of West Point, and we also happen to have our village manager who's a graduate of West Point. And for all the other veterans within the village of Pinehurst, I hope you enjoyed the day. Thank you for your service. Secondly, on the Partners in Progress, we had a presentation there from Natalie Hawkins and some others. One about the healthy economy we have in Moore County, about the heightened interest from businesses who are located elsewhere in the country that are shopping around for particular sites. And so there's quite a lot of activity. Was also reported that the Partners in Progress are going to change their name in the new year to be more reflective of an economic development organization, and they'll have economic development in their title, and it'll address Moore County in general. So that's one of several new things that they're planning for the coming year, with some more activity and, again, the heightened interest that's going on. Next, just prior to coming here, I attended a 90 minutes introduction to pickleball put on by our Parks and Recreation Department at the Pinehurst Community Center. There were 20 other attendees. It was just a little classroom setting, and there was a little trying out with a pickleball paddle, I guess. But I just want to, obviously, it's a sport that has increased interest. It's got a real foothold now in our community. And for those of you who are listening or are here, the introduction to pickleball is a good course to take, and I encourage citizens to check that out. They offer it from time to time. Next, I also wanted to echo what the village manager said, and I have been saying that for a while now. We have over 17,000 residents within the village of Pinehurst. Many very, very talented individuals who settled here from all parts of the country with all different backgrounds and a lot of knowledge and skill and ability. And please, don't sit on the sidelines. There is a turnover from time to time on our advisory committees. And I really encourage citizens to go onto the website and express an interest if they have such. We have, when you look at our government, there are 5 part-time elected council members, and there are about 40 or so advisory committee members that serve on our advisory committees. That includes the neighborhood advisory committees, which are about there. I think there are 19 slots on that or so. So please, fellow citizens, step up and get in the fray. We can use all the help we can get and the input that you have to offer. And I'll leave the Tri-Cities to Jane.
Lydia, comments, reports?
Thank you. Yes, I have 3 brief ones. First, yesterday I got to attend a reception that the county commissioners put on for outgoing commissioners, Catherine Graham, Otis Ritter, and Jerry Dakey. A slideshow was done of all of the things they have done, and that was a wow thing. But then the county manager read a list of the capital improvements that have been made under these commissioners. That was an impressive list. So this has been a very solid group of public servants, and they're going to be missed. Second, the Donald Ross birthday banners downtown are pretty cool looking. So thank you to staff, whoever designed those. And will they stay up through Christmas, or will they have to come down for the Christmas decorations?
I'm hoping the Ross banners will keep up into the new year.
Yeah, they're pretty neat looking. And then last, this Saturday, the Park and Recreation Department is putting on the Turkey Trot. And Jeff Sanborn, you said you hope people were watching. I hope people are watching and will sign up for this, because the last day to sign up is the 18th. But it's right over here in the pavilion. It starts at 8:30 with it's a 1-mile little gobbler race for the children. And then the 5K, which is 3.1 miles, starts at 9 o'clock. You don't have to run it. You're welcome to walk it. You may sign up if you'll Google Pinehurst Turkey Trot. All the information you need is there. But I love this description. It's become a part of this community tradition. Join us for the oldest and most scenic turkey trot in North Carolina. Runners get the chance to trek through the beautiful streets and residential neighborhoods of the village of Pinehurst in the Sandhills region of central North Carolina. So again, Google Pinehurst Turkey Trot. You've got until November 18th to sign up. Come on out and have a good time. That's it.
Thank you, Lydia. Jeff Morgan?
Just a couple. Number one, thank you to all the poll workers for the election day and all that they've done there. Anybody who went out and voted, appreciate it. Thank you. Number two, the flags that were put up for Veterans Day and the decorations I thought were very nice, and we have a very large veteran population here in Pinehurst, so I appreciate the support of that. I thought it was excellent. And last thing is happy early Thanksgiving to everybody. That's all I got.
Thank you, Jeff. Jane, please.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that the Festival of Trees is going to be taking place this Thursday through Sunday at the Carolina Hotel, and the proceeds of that go to benefit the Sandhills Children's Center. And the Pinehurst Business Partners plays a role in that as well. Great. And then this morning, Jeff Sanborn and Pat Pizzella and I attended the Tri-Cities group, which is some folks from Pinehurst, Southern Pines, and Aberdeen who get together from time to time and talk about ways that the 3 towns can work together on some of the issues that face us all. And at the moment, it's the second meeting that's been devoted to affordable housing issues and looking really at them countywide as well as just for the individual towns. And I think it's not the last meeting that we're going to have on it, but I think what we're going to need to do is figure out what populations in our town need assistance with affordable housing. And I think it's probably going to be, as Jeff Sanborn mentioned at the meeting, police and fire and teachers and medical workers and so forth. And there is quite a scattershot of different funding programs and loans and stuff out there. They don't really coordinate with each other. So it's a little frustrating to try and put together a program of assistance, but that's basically where this effort is heading. So it's interesting to see it start to come together. Thank you.
Jane, thank you very much. We'll move on into agenda item number 3, which is a motion to approve the consent agenda. Before we have that motion, are there any council members who wish to have any of the consent agenda pulled out for later discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll move to approve all items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
That's a motion by Jane Hogeman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pizzella. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Move to agenda item number 4, proclamation for the Shop Small this season. This is a proclamation that is pretty obvious by its title. Doug, do you have a little bit of background you want to convey to us tonight, though, please? It's on.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, so next week is our Shop Small week. So it is a week where we're having the Welcome Center open the entire week. And if anyone makes a purchase at a business here in the village of Pinehurst, if they bring their receipt to the Welcome Center, they'll be entered into a drawing. We have drawings, one for each day with kind of smaller prizes. But then we have 5 large gift baskets that we will be auctioning off at the end of the week or raffling off. And so those will go to 5 people that have submitted receipts, and we'll draw them randomly out. And we have about $5,000 in prizes and awards that are in those gift baskets. So we encourage everyone to get out and to shop local. Next week, the week of Thanksgiving. Nationally, Saturday is Shop Small Saturday, so we're kind of joining the national Shop Small movement that day, but we've tried to expand it to cover the whole week and to encourage shopping in our local stores for the entire week.
Doug, thank you. We have a proclamation prepared by this national organization, and I'm going to read that and ask for council consent to having this issued on behalf of the Village of Pinehurst. This is a mayoral proclamation from the Village of Pinehurst. Whereas the Village of Pinehurst, North Carolina, celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and our community. And whereas, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 32.5 million small businesses in the United States. Small businesses represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees. Small businesses are responsible for 62% of net new jobs created since 1995, and small businesses employ 46.8% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. And whereas 79% of our consumers understand the importance of supporting the small businesses in their community, on Small Business Saturday, and 70% report the day makes them want to encourage others to shop small. Independently owned retailers and 66% report that the day makes them want to shop small all year long. And whereas 58% of shoppers reported they shopped online with a small business, and 54% reported they dined or ordered takeout from a small restaurant, bar, or cafe on Small Business Saturday in 2021. And whereas the Village of Pinehurst supports the local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore be it resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Pinehurst, North Carolina, in regular session assembled this 15th day of November, 2022 as follows. We, the Village Council, do hereby proclaim November 26, 2022 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Council, is that agreeable?
Yes.
Thank you. That date obviously fits right into our own plans for a longer period, Doug. So thank you for helping us get that taken care of. I know there's some members of the small business community here tonight, and I want to let you know that this proclamation we'll make available on an electronic basis so it can be distributed to other members of the business community here in Pinehurst. So thank you very much for your attention to this matter. Jeff, we move on.
All right, the next item is our first quarter financial update. And Doug's going to handle this with Brooks' imminent departure here in a few days. Doug's going to try his hand for the first time at his new and hopefully very temporary responsibility to cover these statements for you in the future.
If it makes you feel any better, Brooke did review them, so they are accurate. So we're all good. But fiscal year 23 has started off very well. So we started off with, in this first quarter, $6.9 million in revenues exceeding expenditures, which is pretty normal for this time of year because a lot of the revenue comes in the first quarter with the property taxes, and we haven't spent most of our money in the first quarter. But we have increased our investment balance by $6.3 million for a total of about $25.6 million. The vast majority of that is held in the North Carolina Capital Management Trust government portfolio. And if we talk more about the general fund, we have $961,000 above revenue for this first quarter, above expectations. A lot of that has to do with the property taxes that have come in the first quarter. One thing that I think is important to note is that the amount of taxable property increased about 2.5% in the first quarter, and the motor vehicle valuations increased about 8%. And our budget was based on a 1.2% and a 1% growth for those. So those are coming in much higher than the budget has been and what the traditional trend has been.
Yeah, that's just a question. Why do you think there's been a drop in the income for the first 3 months year over year from 7.6 to 6.9?
And yeah, so that's pretty typical. The 6.9, the 7.6 million is last year was kind of an abnormal amount. So the 6.9 is typically what it has been. So I don't see any concern in that. It's basically what it's always been. One of the other things this year, our investment income is about $70,000 up in the quarter. Obviously, with interest rates being a lot higher and continuing to decline, that'll continue to increase through the rest of the fiscal year. On the expenditure side, we spent about 1.7 less than we originally expected in the first quarter. That's about 26%. That's also kind of typical. It takes a while for some of the projects to get going to spend the money in the first quarter. And as far as capital outlay, that's the same thing as well. We've only spent about 13% of the capital budget so far this year. As we look forward into the future, we have the property tax base, like I said, grew very well this past quarter at 2.6% overall. But in the future, that might be slowing down a little bit. Typically, we estimate about 150 new single-family homes being built in a year. So far this fiscal year, we only have 6 permits pulled. Last year, this time, we had about 25, so that's something we're keeping an eye on and just trying to make sure that we keep that in mind as we project for the next year. It's kind of not to be unexpected with mortgage rates increasing and things like that. The housing market may be slowing down. Some other items to point out, the Fair Barn covered 91% of its operating expenses this past quarter. That's up from 79% last year. And the harness track covered 12%. The harness track's a little bit of an anomaly. Most of the revenue comes in the second and third quarter, so we wouldn't expect it to cover a lot of its expenses at this point in the year. In many ways, we're doing very well this quarter. The major downside in this past quarter is that we are losing our financial services director, Brooke Hunter. But we will do our best to fill in without her, and she'll be up before you in just a minute. So I won't steal too much of her thunder, but we are going to miss her. Are there any questions the board has on our quarterly financial review?
I had just a couple of follow-up comments, Doug. Reflecting on our October 25th meeting when Brooke and others were talking to us, I do recall, and this goes to your comment a minute ago about housing, we're projecting a fairly significant decline in housing starts in Pinehurst this year from the last few years. So these numbers here, I don't know if they track exactly with that, but it's an indication that we certainly are seeing less building at the current time than we might have expected. And certainly had over the last few years. So I don't think that's unexpected. However, it does seem that everything's a little more volatile. Even in the first quarter here, we'll see some leveling off after we get all of our taxes in and all that. But everything seems a little more volatile, both on the revenue side and the expense side. I think the way we budget and the way we report will allow us to accurately assess what that means during the next 6 months or so. So I'm not really concerned about it, but it's a phenomena that I've witnessed now for a couple of years. Things are a little more volatile quarter by quarter in some of the areas that we thought were pretty steady. Doug, I don't know if you have any reflections on that.
Especially in the first quarter of the fiscal year for this report, I mean, we don't have, we've only spent about a quarter of the money or not even. So in the first quarter, it does seem to fluctuate more. These numbers will look more extreme than they might actually be.
Any other questions for Doug Willardson?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on the housing. Brooke did provide some specific numbers about the housing starts for the last 5 years in response to a question I had. And we had we averaged 137 per fiscal year for the last 5 years. We had a decline. We peaked in 2020, fiscal year 2020. And we have had a slight decline, but at some point we run out of lots. So, we only have a finite amount of acreage and area zoned for single-family homes and so forth. So I think the mayor, as well as you pointed out there, we have a new factor regarding mortgage rates that impacts housing. But we've had a healthy, robust last 5 years for the Village of Pinehurst in that area. Thanks.
Any other questions for Doug?
I do have a question. On the second page, we say total tax base increased by 2.6% as a result of growth, but the housing starts have dramatically decreased. Is it evaluated at the sales price? So is that the growth, just the explosion in sales prices in Moore County? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that will play into it definitely, that they'll see that the value from the sales prices has increased, and so they'll increase the values overall.
Yeah, so that, even though we're running out of inventory, if we've got a steady growth in prices, that's good, but how long can that last? And also, to Pat's question, I noticed on the first page that we had a general fund is showing $6.9 million for the first 3 months compared to $7.6 last year, which is less. So I thought, well, revenues must have gone down or expenses went up, but it was the exact opposite. Revenues went up, expenses went down, which seems, if that's the case, it seems that really can explain the decrease in general fund. But I recognize it's beginning of the beginning of the year, and it is a little bit volatile anyway. But with the start of the quarter, start of the fiscal year, as things settle out, we start getting a more realistic picture of what things look like.
Yeah, and actually now things are coming to my memory. Last year, there were some big ticket items that didn't get spent in the first quarter, so that increased that amount last year.
Okay. Makes sense. But that's all I had. Thank you.
Other questions? Doug, thank you very much for that. We'll move on. Jeff, we'll go to item number,
Number 6. So Brooke is going to do some work tonight. She's got a couple of topics to cover for you. And the first is a request for you to appoint a new finance officer for the Village of Pinehurst, given that she will be departing on Friday.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, as Jeff mentioned, this item refers to appointing a finance officer in the interim. The North Carolina general statutes require that local governments appoint a finance officer to serve at the pleasure of the board or council. So because of the upcoming personnel change with my departure on Friday, council is required to appoint a new officer, a finance officer, to cover this interim period while a replacement is being recruited. So we are requesting the appointment of Sheila Edmonds, who is the current Assistant Financial Services Director here at the Village, to serve in this capacity beginning on November 18th. And so that would be the day after my departure. Sheila is representing the Village at the North Carolina Government Finance Officers Association Conference this week, so she couldn't be here tonight, but she'd like to be and wishes she could be. She is a CPA, and she's worked for the Village now for about 5.5 years. And she has also filled in for me on multiple occasions, including my maternity leave and vacations and things like that. So I'm definitely qualified for this role in the interim. So we have resolution number 22-24 available for your consideration.
thank you, Brooke. We'll deal with the resolution in a minute or two, but I'm a little bit familiar with Sheila, given your absences occasionally, and yeah, I think she's very well fitted for this job, but this is a very important position, so we want to make sure that it's handled right, and I appreciate your recommendation and Jeff's on that. Are there questions for Brooke with respect to this replacement? Pat?
No questions about the replacement. I am curious, I guess we've posted a job? We're going through the traditional
Recruiting
process of recruitment?
That's
Okay.
exactly right. And it is available right now for applications, open for applications at the moment.
On the, I guess this is just sort of ironic, but I'm on LinkedIn, and you know how LinkedIn sends out something that says, hey, here's a job you might be interested in. I just want you to know, they sent me that.
There you go.
I have no interest at all, but I just found it ironic. The system is working. You're out there posting the job, and good luck.
Ironically enough, I also received it.
Okay.
Well, Pat, with your constantly getting the surveys sent to your mother-in-law, and now you get this, I'm wondering if there's an inside connection you have somewhere here in the
I
village.
have no idea.
Something's going on here. Other questions for Brooke or Jeff Sanborn on this issue? We have a resolution to approve. Is there so motion for that?
I move to approve Resolution 22-24, appointing a finance officer for the Village of Pinehurst.
That's a recommendation from Councilmember Bosch.
Second?
Second motion by Councilmember Pizzello. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We wish Sheila the best. Brooke, you're going to go on to the next item too, I believe. Please do.
Perfect. So this next item is related to an ordinance to ratify an attorney contract and to amend the budget for some legal expenditures. The village engaged the legal services of Hartzog Law Group when defending a recent lawsuit that was regarding the alleged open meeting law violations. And as of November 7th, 2022, the total legal expenditures for that case were $53,304. Some additional expenditures may be incurred because the decision was appealed, but a budget amendment is needed to cover those expenses. Also, when the contract was originally executed, we anticipated expenditures being within the village manager's delegated authority of $50,000. However, as I just mentioned, expenditures have slightly exceeded that limit. So council is asked to ratify this contract, which essentially means approve it and make it officially valid back to the date of execution. So the attached ordinance has language for both of those items. First, a budget amendment for $50,000 to cover a majority of those expenditures. Some of the costs can be covered within the existing budget ordinance. And it also includes language to ratify that agreement with an effective date of May 20th, 2022. So we have ordinance 22-22 available for your consideration.
Thank you, Brooke. I read through that. I understand the content has two pieces of change into it. So I don't have any trouble with that contract, but council members may have questions. Anybody have questions on this motion? Jeff, Jane, Lydia, do you have questions?
I do. If this, I know nothing about Court of Appeals. If this carries, this will, I assume, carry us through the Court of Appeals, and if more money is needed, then there'll be another budget amendment later. And then also, just on the ordinance itself, the first, second, fourth, whereas plaintiff appealed the decision, additional expenditures may be incurred. Isn't it that they likely, or we have may, which sounds,
Sure. Yes, likely would probably be more accurate,
Yeah,
assuming the attorneys would have additional work that they would have to.
like, I
reach
don't
out
do
for.
appellate work, but I think there's a brief filed and then another brief and then their hearing. So if that's the case, then that may would be more, should be a little bit stronger.
Right. And we did incorporate an estimate of between 5,000 and 10,000, somewhere in that range for additional expenditures, just not knowing where that may land when proposing the 50,000 here.
Which whereas was that to be attached to?
It's the third one. It says whereas the plaintiff appealed the decision and additional expenditures may be incurred, but
Right.
it seemed like we were approving this additional 50 to accommodate the cost of the appeal, if I'm understanding this correctly.
The 50 is also for current year costs that have already been incurred.
Right.
And so included in that would be an estimate of between, like I said, around $5,000 to $10,000 for the appeal, because our assumption is that a bulk of the research and work has been completed already.
So do we need to make are you suggesting, or Jeff, to
That's-
change the wording?
That's up to you all. I don't know that
I don't,
if you feel like it changes the effect of it, you could certainly adjust
I
that.
think it's more accurate. Again, I don't know the appellate process. All I think I know is briefs are filed, and then responsive briefs are filed, and then there's a hearing in court. So that's, I don't know what that would cost. But based on my assumption of how the appellate process works, that may seem like, the word may seem like it should be likely will be.
I've got no problem changing it to will likely,
yeah, I have no
Just
problem,
add the word may likely be.
likely.
or will likely, or may likely, that's fine,
Yeah.
either way.
Okay.
I agree, no problem with that. I do have
Any
a
other
question.
questions on
Yeah,
that?
I just have one question. I'm familiar with the contract ratification, so I get it. The only thing that confuses me here is the authority for the $50,000 existed. So why aren't we just doing an amendment for additional $3,400 or whatever it is?
Right, and because the initial contract itself, the total contract, was still involved in that same initial, under the same terms as that initial letter, and so the authority that's been delegated to Jeff is for the entire contract itself. So we're just requesting, because we're not necessarily changing the terms of the contract in any way, it's just total expenditures have now exceeded where we thought it would originally be at 50.
Oh, okay, I'm fine. I see the,
Because it was an estimate based on hours of work, it wasn't a
I'm
flat
fine. I
rate.
was trying to understand the transaction. I get it. Thank you.
Right, sure.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Jane?
Sure, I understand. We're proposing to consider this as written with no changes, correct?
I was going to recommend that the motion, which we have, be amended by the addition of one word, the word likely, to the third whereas after the word may, before the word be. And I think Councilmember Morgan is on to my idea here and is about to make such a motion.
Right.
Just guessing that, but that's,
Right. I will second that.
so does that explain it, Jane?
I-
We're adding one word to the third whereas, the word likely, may likely be. Whereas the plaintiff appealed the decision and additional expenditures may likely be incurred.
I'm just having a very hard time.
Hearing? Yeah,
Okay.
there is an echo here tonight.
Right where the pointer is at? Right where the pointer is at?
Yeah.
Want to
That
put
may
add-
be,
add a
put
word?
likely in between may and be.
What is the word you want to add in?
Likely,
Likely.
Likely. In that it's anticipated that there may be additional expenditures.
I don't know how it helps, but
I think it's all right.
Fine. Jeff?
I move to approve the ordinance 2222, amending the ordinance appropriating funds for operation of the Village of Pinehurst fiscal year 2023 regarding revenues and expenditures, the general fund pertaining to legal fees and contract ratification, with the addition of the word likely in the third whereas.
the fourth
Whereas, so that whereas, this would be the fourth whereas between the words of may and be, put likely. So it may likely be.
That's a motion by Councilmember Morgan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pizzella. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, and I know the clerk has that, and I won't sign the document until it's added to later. Brooke, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before you go, we do wish you well. We thank you for your service, and we know you're a little bit available to us for a period of time, but with Doug and Sheila and Jeff Sanborn involved in it, I hope we don't have to call you
You're
very
in
much.
great hands, that's right.
Good luck.
Great hands.
Congratulations. Moving on to item number 8. Mr. Sanborn.
And this is the most recent update to the proposed light pollution nuisance ordinance, if you will. And if I could ask Kelly to go ahead and hit the link there and then scroll down to 92.18. This is where
Yeah.
the meat of the
Exactly.
changes are. And we've had over my tenure here over the last 7 years, from time to time, concerns about lighting between neighbors in our residential neighborhoods comes up occasionally. Historically, it's been mostly things like spotlights that, a neighbor won't have pointed out, downward onto their properties. It might be pointed more outward toward other neighbors, and it offends them, and we've tried to work through those situations, but we had not previously made any changes to our municipal code about those things. And so, more recently, we've had a complaint about this lighted horse situation. And so we have proposed a change to the municipal code language that we think that, it's not, the idea here isn't necessarily just to focus on that lighted horse, but to try to address all the things that we think might be thought to be nuisances with regard to light. And the way we tried to approach this was we tried to think of all the different things, all the different ways that people use light at night that are thought to be legitimate and reasonable, and lay those out and say, these are okay. And if it isn't one of these things, then we'd like to have those other light sources turned off between a period of time we have proposed is 10 to 6. The 10 p.m. start time aligns with our other nuisance language associated with, noise and everything else, and that's whether 10 p.m. is the right answer for all seasons of the year, I don't know, but it does align with our other ordinance language, and I think it's geared toward a notion that, in general, people want to be able to sleep soundly starting at 10 o'clock. But for example, for our noise ordinances, it's okay to, before 10 o'clock, it's okay for people to be doing things that make noise, even if it does offend their neighbors, but because it's thought to be reasonable. So the last time we reviewed this language with you, I think the language was exactly as it is written in this draft, with the exception of the addition of item number 5 there. After we had that engagement with you a couple months ago, we had a comment come up from the staff that we had left something out in terms of one of those reasonable uses of light that people typically have, at their residence, and that's ceiling or wall-mounted lights that illuminate residential doorways and porches. And so, if there are other things, we're all ears. That if there are other things that people think are normal and reasonable uses of light, then I think we want to take the opportunity to add it to this list. But otherwise, this is our staff's best effort at trying to do something that's reasonable and rational.
So if something falls outside of these 5 categories, then it's an issue we're trying to deal with in this ordinance the way it reads now.
Yeah.
And there's been, and you've mentioned it too, Jeff, there's been some debate, I guess, or certainly discussion in the staff about whether the time of day is the right end point and start point, or whether what we would call a position of the sun point of view on that might make more sense. And I think some of us on the council have some thinking to do about that. But is there additional idea from the staff about the timing of it? Using 10 p.m., as you said, does coordinate with our other parts of the nuisance ordinance, but maybe it works here, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe, thank you, John. Maybe a couple of points on that. I think that from the standpoint of clarity, so all parties involved understand what the start and stop times are, a defined time is helpful. The other is that, it had been suggested that maybe we should think about having the start time be at sundown or at dusk or something like that. But these are lights, right? And people typically only use lights when light is needed, which is after sundown. So why would they be on before sundown? And I recognize that we have a certain case that we're dealing with right now that is the case, but again, this is intended to be not about one situation. It's about trying to create a regulatory framework that fits for our community across a wide variety of situations. So, did that help?
Yeah, yes. I think there are some questions of council, and why don't we take some of those at this point in time? Anybody have thoughts about this that you want to pursue? Jane?
The structure of this is good, and it covers a lot of the ordinary light situations. But there's another type of light situation, which you alluded to, which is a nuisance or a spite lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not covered by this. And that can happen before 10 o'clock. Ordinarily by 10 o'clock, people like to know that their neighbors' floodlights and so on are off, so that when you're trying to get to sleep, you don't have a big old floodlight coming in through your bedroom window, et cetera. But if you've got a light that is improperly intense, that's a different animal, and it's not covered by this, not addressed. And I took a look at our PDO, which has a section on both residential and commercial lighting, and it really doesn't cover it there. But would it be possible for us to say that in residential zones, lighting above a certain intensity, which is foot candles or unshielded lighting, or, we're talking about lighting that isn't really service lighting, it's more decorative or whatever. But that lighting cannot exceed, and I don't know how to express it properly myself, and add that in there as a separate category in order to address that type of occurrence. Because I don't think this gets to the issue that started us taking a look at these kinds of things. Now, when we, in the noise category, the noise ordinance, we do have a noise level for evening and noise level for day. They're different. Noise levels around hospitals and schools and stuff. I mean, so we've got trying to address different things. And I wonder if we could possibly cobble something together for intensity.
Yes, to most directly answer your question, yes, it's possible. I think that most communities have such a framework, not in their municipal code, but they have it in their development ordinance. And it's expressed in terms of a certain light intensity at the lot line. We recognize that our lighting ordinance language is one of those deficiencies that we've got to work on in the future. And whether or not that might address this in the future, I don't know. You mentioned the fact that we now have police officers walking around with decibel level measurers, right? To deal with the concerns about noise. Enforcement of all of these things is a difficult situation because it's happening after hours, right? And so who do we have out there after hours but the police department? Unless we, schedule a staff person to go off on a one-off deal and go out and take a look at a situation. And in this case, it has to be on something that's deemed to be a moonless night because you can't have pollution, other forms of light contributing to the measured reading. And then there's the issues of, whether or not that measured light level would potentially stand up in court because of other sources of light, whether it be from the moon, the stars, the neighbor next door, or anything else. I think it's complicated. And I certainly don't want to add another thing onto our police officers' list of things to do that are really not police related. You could choose to do that. I'm going to say this. I'm going to make this next comment with a word of caution because I think that the authority that we have as a local government that I'm going to call attention to has to be used very carefully. But we do have abatement powers in certain cases for one-off situations that can't be clearly defined in ordinance language, kind of like this one, right, that we can exercise without ever having an ordinance associated with it. Before we would take that action, we would have to consider it very carefully, but that might be another path to dealing with this particular.
Jeff, can you explain how that works?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain how that abatement process works, please?
It's relatively, it's administrative, and it is relatively quick.
Well, the reason I'm asking, we saw this draft, and I had the opportunity to see, we all know this started with one particular situation, and I got to see it, and I got in touch with Darren afterwards, and I said, Darren, I don't think this addresses the problem. And I start with the premise that I would rather have neighbors work things out than the government step in and do something. Especially, I don't know how many of these types of situations that we're dealing with but let's say it's only one or only two, and we're enacting an ordinance for the entire village. And so that's why I told these guys in an email, I really wrestled with this because we're talking about village government stepping in a neighborhood where my preference has always been that the neighbors work it out. So if the neighbors can't work it out, and the only way to fix it or address it is an ordinance, but if there's another way, like I like Jane's idea about lights that are too bright, and, you know, I understand what you're saying about a police and enforcement, but if there's a complaint that comes in about some outrageous lighting, I guess the police would go over with I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
But maybe the abatement thing, I'm just uncomfortable adopting an ordinance if we don't have a village-wide problem. And I understand completely what, it's a very dark neighborhood. It's a wonderfully dark neighborhood. But I don't know how we best address that.
I understand what you're saying completely, and I've been in this role for 7 years. Light complaints are relatively infrequent. They do happen, but they're compared to many other nuisance-related issues in our neighborhoods and across the village. These seem to come up relatively infrequently, at least
Yeah.
with regard to what I hear about. So
Well, how have they been dealt with in the past?
Right.
How have they been dealt with in the past?
we've spent a lot of time talking to the concerned residents, and in some cases with the neighbors. I know that there was one case about 5 or 6 years ago where we didn't resolve it. Nobody was happy. Kind of like this situation. The neighbors didn't want to work together on it.
I think it's always helpful if it can be worked out on a neighbor-to-neighbor basis. What I think I know, at least from the written material we've received here, is that that doesn't appear to be possible in this particular case,
Yeah.
which continues to be the one and only significant case we've recently had. But in my reading and looking at things just over the last couple of years, it seems to be not necessarily in Pinehurst, but in other parts of the country, these sorts of light problems are increasing. Maybe not a lot, but some. And so the likelihood of something happening here beyond where we are today may well be the case. So I come back to the idea of having some sort of guidance in our code that would allow us to at least begin to deal with these if it can't be settled on a local basis, neighbor to neighbor. So from my point of view, I've wondered if going back to one of the ideas that Jane mentioned of having an intensity, or however we want to describe that, be part of the solution here. Jeff, sorry.
Well,
Now, your view of abatement may be a good idea, but I think we'll need to understand that better at some point to
Yeah.
think that it can work here. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
But let's let Jeff finish that point and then come back, Pat.
yeah, and so I guess what I was going to say was that, and that's why when we constructed this language, what we try to do is we try to enumerate all the typical reasonable uses of light at night around a residential property. And because we don't want to prevent people from using light appropriately in their neighborhoods. And point two is that, I made the point that these complaints seem to bubble up fairly infrequently. The one case that I talked about where we weren't able to get the neighbors to reconcile it, we could have fixed with item number 1 if we had this language then. So again, stepping back from this specific situation we're dealing with right now, this is what we think creates the best balance for our community. Recognizing that there are some deficiencies in our development ordinance with regard to the lighting standards that are there. and recognizing that that language is generally most applicable to new development, which is part of why it's written the way it is right now.
But it doesn't address this particular situation. I don't even want to call it problem, this situation. And Jane's suggestion could, and the other process, maybe that would too. It just seemed like we have these two, if this doesn't address the problem, not problem, the situation, but there are two other paths that might. Is it worth exploring those before we do something?
Up to you.
Yeah, I guess abatement always exists, whether we do this or don't do this. So that's an arrow in our quiver
Yeah.
to solve a problem. The only reason we are at this point is because the neighbors, or actually one neighbor, doesn't want to cooperate with all the other neighbors to find a mutual satisfactory solution to this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be spending any time on this. This truly came from the neighbors, from a community. It wasn't from one individual. It was a large group of neighbors that brought this to our attention. I'm prepared to vote for this. It may not be the perfect solution, and I'm prepared to vote for something that upgrades it a bit. But I do not want to just leave the status quo as it is at the moment, because we are, it says pollution in residential neighborhoods, and that's what we are in Pinehurst, a collection of residential neighborhoods. And these awkward situations develop from time to time. I think was it last meeting we dealt with livestock? So now we have a lighting situation. So anyway, that's my feeling, but
What risk do we put the village at if we use the abatement?
Litigation. So we've got to be very careful that we're on
All right.
firm
Well,
footing.
We just
Yeah.
don't want to know. It's,
You're always better off if you have ordinance language that you can point to, but some things are just very difficult to define with regard to ordinances, so.
I understand. And I also understand Lydia's point I don't like making rules for unique situations, and it's not even solving the problem we're talking about. We have a unique situation here, and I'm not seeing where that's going to help us here. A couple things on there when you're talking about ceiling or wall-mounted lights to illuminate residential doorways and porches. There's a lot of people who like to have their porch lit up, and even in past 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, leave the lights on for the kids, whatever. But areas I grew up in, you wanted lighting to be able to see stuff because you had less criminal behavior when you had lighting too. And so, not that we have a large problem here with that, but you know, if somebody leaves their Christmas lights on and
that's
you know,
Yeah, those are
throughout
all
the night, that kind of
exceptions,
stuff.
the Christmas holiday decorations and all are carved out
out,
there.
yeah.
And I think certainly, we leave our porch light on all night. I think it's not a question of leaving the porch light on. This is a question of
Correct.
you know, like Hollywood opening of
So-
a major movie.
Bottom line,
Spotlight.
what problem are we trying to solve? This isn't solving it.
Well, I
Okay.
think it's a step in the right direction.
Also after 10 o'clock,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
So it's,
But it doesn't solve the problem. And I don't want to call it problem. It doesn't solve the situation that was first presented to us.
Okay.
The situation we're facing, which, as I said, I anticipate we may see more of, I hope we don't.
I do not see these as unreasonable, okay? I do not see these as unreasonable.
Yeah,
For
right.
having ordinances in our town, okay?
I agree.
And so, I'll leave it at that. I'm prepared to vote for what we have here. I'm just not convinced we're not going to be revisiting this in the near future.
I can't debate you on that.
Jeff
but
Morgan,
it's-
I'm sorry, the last few words I lost.
I am
because
not
of-
convinced we are not going to be revisiting
Yeah,
this in the near future.
right.
Right.
Either by our own initiative to
Correct.
update it, or other things.
This
that
is
may
not
happen.
a full solution. This is a step, but
Right.
I won't disagree that it's a reasonable type of thing that
Right,
the
right.
majority of residents can live with, and it's not, I'm also careful not having an overreach from the village, okay? So,
Jeff Sanborn, let me ask you a question now. Let's say that at 10:01 PM, this situation is still existing. When does this go into effect? Tomorrow? Would it go into effect tomorrow?
If you approve it tonight, yeah.
Okay, so let's say at 10:05, that situation still exists. So then the neighbors call the police,
Right.
and then the police go,
They validate the condition, and then the case is handed off to our code enforcement officer.
okay. And if the same level of reception still exists, we have the fines.
Which,
Let's say that the lights are not turned out at 10:05, 10:10, 10:15, 11, night after night after night, and the police go over there night after night after night, then what?
each
We
one
have
of
a
those-
penalty
Each one of
provision.
those would be a separate offense, is what you're saying, yeah.
But that would be coming through the planning office at that point. The police would have done their work initially,
Yeah.
I think. Okay, does that help, Olivia, a little bit on the
I'm
procedure?
just, I'm anticipating, since we have some of the residents who have been concerned about this here, I want them to be able to understand what happens next.
Yeah,
How does their life get better after, what do they expect after this? What are they to do tomorrow night, the next night, and the next night?
Well, let me ask you a question. There's a penalties section if we scroll down. So what happens to the person who is in violation of this little ordinance we have? What?
General penalty.
$50,
Per violation? Okay,
which is,
well, it's like the taxi cab meter. It keeps, let me tell you, it keeps clicking. Maybe it's not enough, but there is something in place to serve as a deterrent. Small, but
I still think, at least for future consideration, if not immediately tonight, the issue of the intensity, because that matches the noise pollution issue that we have. We've set decibel levels, as, again, Jane pointed out. Something about the intensity seems to be, me, to make sense and make enforcement easier and with a specific standard that can be measured. Now,
Yeah.
how many
Well, I
light
mean,
measuring
you're gonna
devices do we
measure it,
want
you
each of
gotta
our
do it on
police
a
to have?
moonless night, preferably with full cloud cover. So I mean, think about how often a moonless night happens, right?
I'm tending to agree with
It
Jeff.
sounds easy, it's not. I guess
All
is what I
right.
would.
However, following Lydia's line of thinking here, but if we approve this now and it goes into effect, there may be some issues there about the time of day. I think we know that. But at 10:05, at least on day one,
Yeah.
the police are going to get called. They're going to make a report of their observation because of the time of day, nothing to do with illumination standards.
Yeah.
And that's going to be turned over to the planning department for enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay. A letter will be written. They have time to respond to that. So something will work out. It may take 6 weeks, but it will be dealt with. And the fines would apply
Yeah.
at that point. So maybe that's, Council, maybe that's a way forward tonight. But from my point of view, too, I'd like to think through and work with staff on this issue of some sort of illumination intensity standard, which to me continues to make sense, but we'll talk.
Well, it's a
Pat, did you
good,
have a thought? I'm sorry. Lydia?
it's a first step. And, Jeff Morgan may be right. We may be revisiting this in some form, and staff certainly will be dealing with it, but it's a first step.
Yeah.
Maybe not a perfect first step.
Yeah, I'm kind of speaking off the top of my head here, but I seem to recall that at some point, one of the neighbors approached this resident and asked for them to put it on a timer, and they refused to do that. Well,
Got a brighter deer.
so it won't necessarily fix the whole problem, but it fixes the problem after 10 o'clock.
Start.
it's a tool for the
Yeah.
the village to be on the side of residents who run into this situation. Hopefully, it's a rarely used tool, and if we have to revisit it, we revisit it. But I think, hearing our discussion, it seems reasonable.
And it's not going to have our police walking around with illumination meters.
Yeah,
We do. What's,
yeah.
Well, how do council feel generally about an illumination standard, whether it's judged by the police or some other?
I'd rather not go there yet. I'd rather not go there. I don't think it's necessary. And the other part of this is the measurement aspect to it. And I'm not an expert in measuring light, but as I did my quick Google search here 2 minutes ago, the lux meter that's trying to do it and what Jeff is talking about, just, we're enforcing a timer. This is a legislative timer, okay? And let's start with that and go from there.
Right, and I mean, I can understand the appeal of the lumens measurement idea, but where you see that referenced is in planning documents, and it's in planning documents, and the way that works is that at the time of an application for a development, whether it be a commercial development or, typically it would be a commercial development, a qualified engineer does an engineering study that says that this is going to be the lumen impact across, right? So it's not set up to be used where people are out with light meters at night. It's set up so that you can get certification from an engineer that says this is going to be the impact of this plan.
Right, and that's in a situation where somebody's trying to provide lighting over an entire site, a commercial site maybe, or even a residential site where, you're
Yeah.
got to have security lights and yada, yada.
It's a math problem instead of I got to try to figure out how I can take a
And-
measurement under ideal conditions problem.
The proposed ordinance as drafted frames the ordinary situation very well. But let's say somebody decided they wanted to have a tennis court at their house. They were going to build a tennis court, and they were going to put up big lights so they could play at night. Now, those tennis court lights put off a big thing of light, and they're, not shielded. And my old town, where I used to live, they wouldn't let you do it. You couldn't put up tennis court lights. It's the same type of thing where you've got a great big unshielded light source with the potential for a real nuisance intrusion on neighboring properties. And this ordinance doesn't address that. We're not talking about the ordinary situation. We're not trying to make it hard for people to have regular old lights. We're talking about how do we use our ability to craft nuisance ordinances to protect people from spite lighting.
Well, my understanding of this is that at 10 o'clock, the tennis court lights have to come off.
That doesn't work if somebody has a light that's so bright that it is a true intrusion, and it's on during the evening hours when you might like to be on your patio.
No, but the doctor's question, I think, is the right question. Under this, at 10 o'clock, the tennis lights go off.
Yeah, so those lights have to go off,
They have to go
and there's a timing on there. I don't see us being able to come up with a ordinance that's going to cover every single thing on here. And it comes back to the common sense. Is juice worth the squeeze here? Okay? And right now, we're putting in a timer on there saying, please turn your bright lights off at 10 o'clock. Okay? And that seems like a reasonable first step. We may be coming back later to do more stuff, but let's just take this first step right now, and let's not have any more overreach than what we have.
Tennis courts, if somebody wanted to put tennis courts on their property, wouldn't they have to get approval for that? Wouldn't they have to go to planning?
Sure.
Do we?
Yeah, he's nodding, so it's not like somebody's going to start putting a tennis
Well,
court.
he said,
on.
Who's got room for a tennis court on a residential property?
Exactly, I mean, so I'm thinking about
It was just an example, though. There might be, they might just put up a pole with a light on it. You get the same result, right? So,
I can't imagine if someone wanted to put tennis courts on their property with lights that the lighting would have to be controlled largely, as you say, in a development sense. What's the lighting going to be on that on that property from that particular addition. And of course, there'd be issues of
Yeah.
coverage and all that as well.
But there'd be
we
no
can continue
midnight
to-
tennis if this is in place.
Yeah, yeah.
And with
How about
regard to
midnight
the
pickleball?
the current situation and with potential situations like Jane was calling attention to, we can continue to look at that abatement authority that we have, and really is a significant nuisance to neighbors, then maybe, we can rely on that authority.
Is there any other discussion on this point? Is there a motion that would be made?
I move to approve ordinance 22-23, amending Chapter 92 of the Pinehurst Municipal Code.
That's a motion by Jeff Morgan.
I second it.
Second by Councilmember Pizzella. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor? So we said aye. Any opposed? None? Going on. Jeff, initially, I thought you misread the ordinance number, but you did it exactly right. Thank you very much. 2223. All right. Mr. Sanborn, we'll move on to item number 9.
Okay, and if I recall correctly, we got Matt coming up next.
Matt
with
coming
the,
up for the next
with the
two
business survey
presentations.
results for this year.
And then we'll move to comments after that, other business and comments. Matt, good evening.
Good evening. I'm
Going to make the next two presentations, I think, Matt.
All right, now it's working for us. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to see you all again. So as Jeff said, this is going to be a presentation on the 2022 business survey. And as a reminder, the other week we had the community survey, and this year, just because of the way the survey's timed out, that now I'm coming to you with the business survey results. It may, oh, okay. So as a reminder, just like with the community survey and this year with our neighborhood quality of life survey, we used ETC Institute to conduct the survey on our behalf for businesses. And this year we did all 420 businesses that ETC Institute identified received a hard copy mail version of the survey. And then for once that survey was out for approximately 7 to 10 days, similar to what we do with the community survey, if there are email addresses or phone numbers that are attached to that list as well, ETC Institute will contact them either via email or via text messages to try to receive feedback on the business survey. We are moving slow. Okay. So the purpose of the business survey, just like again with our community survey, is to better understand the ways that we as the village can improve the quality of services that are provided to businesses within the community, and also to measure ourselves against trends from previous surveys. This is the 10th year in which we've conducted the business survey. It's a 5-page survey. Again, it takes approximately 15 minutes to fill out. And as I mentioned before, it was done both by mail and online to all businesses within the Village of Pinehurst list. 75 completed surveys was the number that we shoot for every year, and we received 75 responses this year.
Can I ask some questions on that? I want to
Sure.
go to this is our 10th business survey in a row, right?
Yes.
We've done 10, for 10 years now we've done this. How much do we pay a year for this survey?
I have to go back and look. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I would really like to know that. How many businesses do we have in the Village of Pinehurst?
So I can tell you from the number of which they sent out was 420.
So,
I don't have the number of total businesses within the Village of Pinehurst from according to a list that we have. But I can,
well, okay, so they
Yeah, I think there
sent
were
out 400.
I asked the same question earlier. It was 420
yes.
received the survey itself.
Yes, so just like with the community survey, the ETC uses a third-party affiliate to
Right,
receive the
but what
list.
we know about the community survey is how many residents we have.
Yeah.
Okay, and what we don't, evidently, we don't know at the moment, I'm sure you can find out, is how many businesses we have. We know we've sent out 420 of these, of which we've gotten completed surveys from 75.
Yes, sir.
So I'm,
As a point, to that point as well, though, we also know that, businesses come and go.
Sure.
So depending on at what time in which you're trying to receive the number of, businesses, that number will fluctuate.
yeah, no, I'm sure that's the case. I guess I have two overriding questions, and we can discuss them as we go through this. One is the amount of times we do this survey every year for 10 years. And I'm just trying to determine are we surveying ourselves to death on 75 responses? I mean, that's why I want to know what the cost is. I mean, there's got to be, talk about, what are you squeezing the juice out of the lemon? We're going right through the entire orange grove here, because this is just, that's what struck me as I went through the survey, was the completed number of surveys. And I thought to myself, wow, we've been doing this for 10 years. And so and that's what we're happy with 75 responses, okay? But it evidently hasn't grown over the years, 75 responses.
So a couple of points to that. First of all, we are very aware that survey fatigue exists. And so the one thing that we pride ourselves on as a village is to make sure that we are understanding the village, both its businesses and its communities. And one way that we are a high-performing organization is to ensure that we are hearing from the community in various ways. And this is one way that the community has come to understand an avenue in which they are able to share that information with the council and with staff. Now, the 75 responses, the survey ended once we received 75 completed surveys. It is the same number, it's a similar point to when we look at the community survey, when we have a certain number in which we are looking to receive before the survey ends. So the goal for these surveys is 75 for business surveys. That doesn't mean that, and within that timeline, if we had received 80, we would have taken 80 at that point. But we know based off of the timeline and what our margin of error is and what we're trying to get with our confidence intervals, that at minimum we need to receive 75 before the survey ends and we can actually start processing the results.
All right, I think we,
Yeah,
someone's
I'm
had
going to
a
have
similar
more questions.
question.
I'll have more questions, but go ahead.
Let's go through that and, go ahead, please, Matt.
So looking first at the characteristics that we saw this year, we're going to start off with a couple of higher end numbers about who responded actually to the survey this year. Approximately 53% of the businesses that responded have been here for 20 plus years within the village of Pinehurst. And 32% were here for less than 10 years old. So that's the dark green and the yellow. Approximately 32% have been here, like I said, for less than 10 years. Of those that responded, 27% of respondents were within the healthcare and social assistance category. And again, these are how they identified themselves. So on the items that are on the screen are the categories in which they were able to self-identify their primary business category. Like I said, 27% were in healthcare and social assistance. And then we had a three-way tie for second between retail, the professional, scientific, and technical services, and then real estate and rental leasing, all at 12%. We also ask our businesses what the organizational size is by the number of employees. And as you can see, 56%, so the majority of them, actually had less than 10 employees. 94% actually were under 100 employees that responded to the survey in 2022. Yes?
Our resident surveys, we don't know which residents respond, correct? We know address, do we know which businesses respond? And are they the same businesses every year?
ETC would, so we don't get the information on the actual address. And so we can say which business addresses received it and therefore were able to, which responded to it, but we can't say which business specifically responded to it. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess I'm kind of, to Patrick's point, if this goes out every year and it's the same people who respond every year, same businesses every year, and the results are the same every year, what's the value in doing it? And don't need an answer right now, it's just the way I'm thinking.
Well, I will say that there are variations that happen from year to year, and we do take this information as a part of the larger conversation that we have. In fact, you'll be seeing me a lot over the next few weeks as we take this information and other pieces of information as we go into the retreat, the pre-retreats and the retreats. So as you'll see, we do have a little bit of historical information that we provide here, and we'll actually have more of that going into the retreats as well. So to your point, where we do see those variations, where we as a village could potentially improve the services in which we're providing for businesses. As a reminder, one of our areas of focuses within the village for 2023 was to support a thriving business community. And so in this way, a lot of the responses of this go into that conversation that we're going to be having over the next few weeks. So we do ask 3 questions to our businesses that respond about around, are you a member of the Pinehurst Business Partners, a member of the Moore County Chamber of Commerce, and then the third one is your business located within the Village Center? And you can see those. Approximately 22% are members of the Pinehurst Business Partners, with about 40% associated with the Moore County Chamber of Commerce. And of those that responded, about 26% were located in the Village Center. Now, when looking at the perceptions of the village, so segmented by location, again, as I just pointed out, we know about 25% were located within the village center. Businesses who are overall satisfied with their overall feeling of safety, 100% said that they were satisfied with being within the village, with safety within the village center, and 98% of those who responded not located in the village center. We start breaking this down by years of operation. Again, you can see here that the only one that showed dissatisfaction was a business. I believe it was one business that said that they were that responded with a dissatisfaction that was in 20 plus years. So that shows up as 3%. When we're looking at, sorry, it's taking a moment. Thank you, Kelly, for the assist. When we look at quality of life, again, looking at village center, not village center, 100% located within the village center said that they were satisfied with their quality of life, their quality of business life, and 98% not located in the village center. Again, I believe that's one respondent.
Is that a yes or no question?
It's a Likert scale. I believe it's a 5-point Likert scale between very dissatisfied, dissatisfied, neutral, satisfied, and very satisfied.
So the green indicates how many of those 5?
3 out of the 5. So it'd be very satisfied, satisfied, and neutrals. So just like with our community survey, we count neutrals as a satisfaction rating because they are not dissatisfied with the result. Oh, with the question. Thanks, Kelly. For a second, it moved right when I hit the button. I thought it was just reading my mind there. Again, similarly to the previous one, the one dissatisfaction rating was in 20 plus years. All others had a satisfaction rating of 100% when looking at the quality of life. Moving on to the next one. Businesses likely to recommend VOP as a business location. And Lydia, to your point here, when looking at over years, we provided a 5-year span here to see if there's any potential trends or movement that we may be seeing. And as we can see, there is a slight increase in those not likely to recommend, again, 3% from the previous year, but all within the ranges that we would expect over the last 5 years. Again, ranging anywhere from 12 to 8%, easily within the margin of error for this survey. When breaking down that number, though, by within Village Center and not within the Village Center, we can see that 17% has said that they were not likely to recommend the Village as a business location. within the village center, and 10% of those located not within the village center. Again, another way of looking at that is 83% said they would, and 90% said that they would. Moving on, looking then at the same numbers, though, broken down by years within, years of existence within the village of Pinehurst. We can see here that the largest percentage that said they would not be likely to recommend would be within the 6 to 10 year range at the 23%. And then 0 to 5 and 20 plus were both at 11%.
It's almost like the marginal tax rate. Once they hit the 11th year, they're all going to be very happy. I mean, I'm looking at that rate. Go ahead.
And then looking at those businesses who rate the business atmosphere within the village today compared to 2 years ago, again, here's a five-year span just to see if there are any potential trends. And you can see that the largest number here is FY20. I'm sure we can all guess at least one potential reasons for that is beginning with COVID in the COVID years at 19%, rated as poor or worse than 2 years prior. But we can have started to see a little bit of an uptick in 21 and 22, now at 14%. We also ask businesses to rate their satisfaction with village services, and then also help us to identify potential priorities for improvement, again, for the conversations that we're about to have going into our FY24 retreats and strategic operating plan. So how would you rate the Village of Pinehurst customer service? 93% said that they were either very good or good. So again, those yellows or greens. When going to the next one, though, we do ask specifically about community services. And we know that overall satisfaction with community services are quite high. Again, I broke down here so you could see all individual Likert responses. The one that I think, similar to what we saw in the community survey the other week, is that code enforcement is at 75% when it comes to the way we look at satisfaction ratings, with 25% showing that they are dissatisfied. Now, there is one that was rated very dissatisfied, and that's under police emergency response, and that was one, it's the darker red in the top right-hand corner. However, 96% of respondents said that were satisfied with police emergency response. And in general, what you'll see is our public safety is both very high when it comes to satisfaction, and then also, I believe it's actually the next slide. Yep, the next slide is actually those public safety ranges are also rated as the most important for business communities. So as you can see, the top three are fire emergency response, police patrol, and police emergency response. Now, when we look at the overall quality of services provided to businesses by the Village of Pinehurst, as you can see, 90% of those that responded said that it's either the quality of service has either met or exceeded their expectations within the last fiscal year or within the last year. Again, breaking that down a little bit more, we look at within the various areas of satisfaction within the village. And so I'll draw your eye to three of them that I think are of note and areas of potential focus moving forward. It's that supporting business growth and development had 18% that showed some dissatisfaction, which was tied for the second highest when looking at dissatisfaction with the level of involvement in local decisions. Both of those were at 18%. And then the third one was availability of employee and customer parking around the business at 14%. So, now when we look at the most recent contact with village government staff, 93% said that village staff was competent, that they agreed with that statement, and about 96% said that they agreed that village staff was courteous. Now, 16% disagreed that their issue was resolved promptly, and that 14% disagreed with that village staff was responsive to their needs at the time in which they interacted with them on the most recent contact. So again, potential areas to look at further and to dive into. Now, looking at satisfaction with community development, about 20% showed some dissatisfaction with business signage regulations, so about 80% were satisfied. And then approximately 12% were dissatisfied with some form of dissatisfaction with zoning ordinances as well. So again, that 8.5% and 3.4%. We also asked businesses to provide information for us and feedback for us on community and event impacts. And so what you'll see here is business overall satisfaction with the village's communication with business owners. And about 84% showed that they were satisfied with the forms in which the Village of Pinehurst work to communicate with them. Approximately 16% showed some type of dissatisfaction. We asked them to help us to identify for us the best ways to communicate with them. And easily at 61%, email, specifically around monthly business e-news, was the highest one. And I will say, just as an aside, we saw this number and we've actually started conversations about best ways to improve upon emails and these business e-news going forward. So again, just another way in which we use this information to find better avenues to communicate with our businesses. But as you can see, the top three there, the second one was direct mail, and then the third one was newsletters. So 1 email and then 2 snail mail type forms. We ask about the different types of events that we put on every year within the village, or the types of events that are put on. The one that had the highest rating of positive impact, as you can see, is the Holly Arts and Crafts Festival. And what I thought was interesting about this, and again, the number is small, it's 75. The raw number is 75. So Holly Arts and Crafts Festival, as I said, has overall the highest positive impact, but also had the highest negative impact at 7.4%. The second one was other cultural activities such as performing arts events at 44.6%, followed by parades such as 4th of July, St. Patrick's, and the U.S. Kids Parade at 43.5%. So in summary, I know I threw a lot of information out at you, but I also know that this will be a part of many conversations moving forward, and we'll have more detail, is that businesses have a high level of satisfaction overall with business services, with village services. As you can see, the top 5 are located there. 4 of which are in public safety, 3 of which are public safety. Fire inspections are in there as well as building inspections. So our inspections teams as well are very high. 50% of responding businesses feel that the overall business environment within the village is better than it was 2 years ago.
How do they feel about it last year? We say, we in this particular one, we cite better than 2 years ago. What was it a year ago?
I believe it was, give me one quick second here. Last year, let's see. So I would have to go back and look at the one that says better than 2 years ago. Right on the one that I provided today, it was combining that it was no change but good, as well as better than 2 years ago. In FY21, that number was 85%, and this year the number was 86%. So, but I can get that number down for you specifically on the ones that said better than.
Send it along when you get a chance. Thank you.
All right. Now, the most important village services, as I've mentioned a couple of times, public safety and response, and as well as streets and grounds were the 2 most important. And then those are broad categories, obviously. And then village as a business location, 89% would be very likely or likely to recommend the village as a business location to friends. And again, we broke that down a little bit more for you, but overall, that's 89%. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. And if I'm not able to answer, I'm happy to get back to you after this meeting as well.
Matt, let me ask a couple questions here. Early on in the survey report, and this is true for some years, we use this term quality of life with respect to the business survey. Now, we use that same phrase when we're talking to our residents and other surveys, but what do we mean by quality of life in the business survey? Is it, how do you differentiate that, if at all, in the business survey from community survey?
So I would say that this survey is a perception survey. So the way it's defined is the way in which the business owner is defining quality of life when they're answering that question.
So it's a quality of business life? Is that what we mean? Is it defined well enough to be that?
I would say that that was more than likely, that would be the way in which I would take that to mean. Is the quality of life of their businesses within the community good or satisfactory in some capacity? Again, I'm not able to answer how, since it's a perception survey, it depends on how they define their business quality of life at the time in which they're answering.
So hopefully it's with a business idea in
Yes.
mind, not, okay.
Yes, and that's the intent, is that it's a business framework.
Right. So that's pretty high marks for that, I would say. Pretty obvious that the business community, at least the ones that are surveyed here, feel that's a very high quality of life, quality of business. But I wonder if we're delving enough into that. And the point in asking it this way is that I think as we go forward with this survey, and maybe as some feel, maybe we need to take a year off once in a while from these things, but I would like to see us delve more into the question of quality of business life, the database issues that we seem to face, especially in the business survey, the events and things that affect businesses, what are they like, what are they not like, which was one of the last slides you have here. So going forward, I'd like to see that we try to maybe change the orientation a little bit on some of this. There may be reasons not to do that, and perfectly willing to hear about that from you and the other staff. But those are some thoughts of mine for the future as we define how this particular survey might work going forward. So I think there are other points and questions to make, and I'd be happy to have any other council members ask those questions. Jane?
In the resident survey, we compared how Pinehurst is doing to how other towns do. And do we know how Pinehurst compares for its businesses' responses to how do other towns also do surveys to businesses?
They do. I will say that, and I just want to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn here. Give me one quick second here. We do not include a benchmark analysis with ETC Institute around business surveys. I would say, I know that we do have information around this, and we do benchmark ourselves around other communities that we know that do business surveys like this every year, or every other year, again, depending on what the timeline is of these other communities. So I don't have that available right now. Most of obviously what I have today is around how we are trending around ourselves and within different areas of the community, but I'm happy to provide what benchmark analysis we do have around individual questions that you may have.
I just wanted, how that might look. I noticed going through the responses where it said, it did tell us how this year's responses compare with last year's responses. And it seems that there was a higher level of satisfaction in 20 and 21 than in 22. And I'm also in the financial report that we had, we did better in 21 than in 22. We had more revenue, had more income coming in I guess fiscal year 2022 than in the current. Anyway, it looks like last year, for some reason, was a bigger and better, fluffier year. Do we know why that is?
Well, the one thing I'll provide a little bit of guidance, at least on the business survey itself. So with only having 75 responses, the margin of error last year and this year, it's between 9 and 10%.
Okay.
And so there's a large window within there of fluctuation that may exist, that may be a part of the conversation in which, to address some of that. Now, that's not to say that that is the rationale or the reason why, but that is something for us to keep in mind with looking at these results.
Another thing on there, when you're talking about a better year financially for the village, I'm not sure there's any correlation with that. Correction, any causation for that. So the difference between correlation and causation, so you may have two things that are occurring more prominently. So I can tell you that you will have more ice cream sales and more shark attacks at the beach. They're going to increase at the same time because more people are in the summer, they're getting more ice cream, but that is not a causation. That's a correlation. And so I think what you're talking about there is more of a correlation with that, not a causation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think that it had anything to do with causation. I just wondered if there was some factor in the universe that caused both of them to happen, like summertime.
Well, I mean, I think, Jan, I think you're, with regard to financials, you're reflecting back to the earlier conversation about the first quarter performance.
Yeah,
We don't know what causes that, but we do know that particularly in the first quarter of every year, we have high volatility
right.
because we're on different paths with collection of, tax revenues and
And it sorts itself out over time.
and
Out
our
of its time,
projects.
yeah.
And, but, maybe reduced revenue is a reflection of decreased economic activity. And so our sales tax revenue is not coming in as high. And maybe if that's, I'm speculating, I'm not saying this is the case, but it could be the case that it's reflective of a deteriorating business environment that might reflect in the attitudes of our local businesses.
Right.
Who knows?
I'm assuming this is all going to be part of the strategic retreat. We're going to include this as we're discussing different things. Yeah, thank you. That's all I got.
Something
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
stands out. Okay, we've got an error rate of 9 to 10%. So that sounds like we set the 75, knowing that will give us if we got more, it would minimize the error rate, correct?
Yes, the higher response rate would have a smaller margin of error. That would be included.
And I don't know if we need to do that, but, look at, are you a member of Pinehurst Business Partners, 21.7? Is your business located in Village Center, 25.7? So not everybody in the Village Center is a member of Pinehurst Business Partners. But also, a lot of these are they're a member of Chamber of Commerce. And, I'm having a hard time trying to understand if we're getting what we need from businesses not in the core village. And I don't know the answer. These just stand out to me because we have a great relationship, I think, with Pinehurst Business Partners, and we work well with them. But if they're businesses that are located outside of the core village that are not members of Pinehurst Business Partners, but if they're members of the Chamber of Commerce, is there some way we need to better reach out to those businesses? And I don't know. We've got a 9 to 10% error rate, which seems pretty significant. And then we've got businesses that are not businesses, do not participate in Pinehurst Business Partners. So all of that just tells me maybe there's a better way. I don't even know what businesses exist, what business locations we have outside of the core village. And I just don't know if we're doing everything we need to do to service those businesses. Just thoughts that are going through my head as I look at these numbers. I don't have to have an answer now.
Yeah, and I
just-
think that's exactly the point I was trying to make in talking about the database. I don't think we have a good database. We need to work on that, and we need to work at ways to outreach to those businesses wherever they are that aren't part of business partners or whatever it is. But we need to know a lot more, I think. And I think we can achieve this through some of the work that Matt is already doing to build a better relationship with the business community overall. That's my long-term point. Thanks, Matt. Jeff Morgan, did you have any other questions? Oh, I didn't mean to. No.
I'll just reserve all the rest for the strategic planning meeting. I think we'll dive into a lot of these questions.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, does Southern Pines conduct a survey like this of their business community?
Off the top of my head, I don't believe so, but
Check on
I can
that?
check.
Okay.
Yes.
And same with Aberdeen. I'm curious if any of our neighbors in Moore County conduct a survey of this nature. Going to, Jane, your comment, the financials are hard data. Those are numbers that actually occur. This is survey data. This is two different animal groups. I mean, one is a survey of 75 out of 400 responses, or 400 solicitations, whereas our financial data is a very hard number. It's audited. We can compare it year over year. I just want to make sure that is the 9 to 10% error rate. One of the reasons I'm interested in how much we're paying for this, that is a horrible margin of error. I mean, I don't know, why would we pay for a 9 to 10% margin of error rate?
So I will say that
I mean, I understand.
the 75 responses are, because of the time in which it would take to be able to receive responses, that would create a smaller margin of error that would exist. But that's typical for most business surveys. When I've talked to ETC Institute, that tends to be the typical range because of the amount of time, energy, and effort that it takes for a business survey to live out within its existence in order to get a smaller margin of error that exists. Because you're overall dealing with a smaller pool, especially in smaller communities. What the actual end value is overall is all going to be smaller. So that's just one of the areas in which you have to balance when doing a business survey.
As I mentioned a while ago, I very much want to engage in the discussion on this and our other surveys when we have our strategic planning retreat. I'm developing this thought that we are over-surveying our community, and we are getting yearly data that we can almost predict the outcome of this. I mean, compared to our data, I mean, we make Lake Wobegon look like a penal colony. We are so off the charts with this data. It's 100%, 100%, 100%. I mean, at some point, do we need to know that every year? So anyway, I look forward to further the information, and I look forward to a real discussion about this whole concept of the surveys and the amount of surveys we do. Thank you.
And yet, Pat, we have responses say people want more communication with the village. So,
Well, we can communicate more without a survey to tell us that. I mean, it's like this, one of the things that popped out of me is the highest rated positive impact number was from the Holly Arts and Crafts Festival, which I attended to have a good time at it. But the highest negative impact is from the Holly Arts Festival. I mean, there seems to be a disconnect. And I also have a question about how they incorporate the neutral number into a positive number. I'm not familiar with that in survey data outside of this world.
That's our call. We have historically done it that way because we don't want to call it dissatisfaction.
No,
So we've historically said, we've looked at satisfaction as being, it's a threshold, right? If you're not dissatisfied, then you're really kind of satisfied.
well,
right?
it's a shrug your shoulders thing,
That's right,
though.
yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if it really belongs in
We just
either
need to be
category.
upfront and say, this is what we mean when we say satisfied.
Yeah,
And
so, okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Matt on this item? Matt? If none, thank you for that. Let's move on to item number 10 on the first quarter report for the SOP.
So you all are with me for a little bit longer. So as a reminder, every year we provide a quarterly report 4 times a year, obviously, around the strategic operating plan update. And so this would be the strategic operating plan update for Q1 of fiscal year 2023. And this one would go through September 30th, 2023. So I'll provide this quickly for you all here. As a reminder, on page 2, that provides us with both the vision and the mission and the values of the village, and overall the balanced scorecard approach, in which I highly recommend anybody who's in the audience or anybody who's listening as well to please check out. On page 3, this is our fiscal year 2023 balanced scorecard. And at the very bottom here, you can actually see, and I've already mentioned one earlier, for 2023, we identified 3 areas of focus, and they are the same 3 that were from fiscal year 22, which are to manage development and enforce codes and ordinances, to support the business community, and to provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. So where have we been since September 30th, 2022? And again, just like with most reports, these things are dynamic. These items are moving. They didn't stop on September 30th for me to be able to provide this report to you. So this information is somewhat dated, and you'll be getting a lot more information in the next couple of weeks. So if you look at me and go, Matt, you didn't provide enough today, trust me, it will be coming. So for 2023, we have 5 initiative action plan items. And so as of September 30th, 1 of them was in progress and on schedule. 3 of them were in progress, not on schedule. And then 1 of them begins in the future within FY23. And I'll provide that level of detail for you in just a minute. We also identify metrics associated with each initiative action plan. And so in order to understand whether or not we're actually meeting the intended goal of the IAP, we have, and again, you'll see this in a minute, different metrics associated with it. 4 of those currently have achieved their projected performance as of the end of September, and 1 of them begins in the future. So if we go to the next page, this is a breakdown of the fiscal year 2023 IAP report for the first quarter. The ones that are in red are associated with the areas of focus, again, that I just mentioned to you previously. All 3 of them fall within the promote high-quality development and appearance goal within our balanced scorecard. Update the PDO is the first IEP that you see there. It's currently listed as in progress, not on schedule. It has been worked on, and I know that you all have been talking about it quite extensively. As of Q1, the initial draft and scope of services had been developed, and they were waiting for next steps, specifically on priorities, and I believe it was around other items within planning and inspections, to be able to really focus on this one going into Q2. Now, as you can see, as of the time, we expected there to be 0 PDO amendments associated with this brought to council, and we are at 0. So we are currently meeting our intended performance for Q1. And please stop me, by the way, if you have any questions. I'm just going to keep rolling through. For the small area plan, that's the second IAP that you see here. Council, as you all are aware, you all approved Village Place and Pinehurst South, small area plans, and we're currently making adjustments at the end of Q1 to finalize those. And you can see one of the ways in which we measured that metric, or that IAP, was around those who attended meetings and worked through Engage Pinehurst. At the time, we didn't have Engage Pinehurst, when we started this, was a little new. We didn't know how much it was going to take off, and as you can see, we had about 1,300 total engagements around the small area plan. So this is for the life of the plan. The third IAP, and again, that's associated with the area of focus, is around the relocation of the public services complex. Now, we've marked it that it started in the future. Again, that was at the time in which this was being Q1. But I did provide an update because there was some items brought to you on October 12th, which is technically Q2, but I couldn't help but put it in there for you. That potential sites were identified and that presentation was made. There's not really an applicable IAP metric that we've identified, because it's either, has there been an identification, yes or no? It's not really a performance, it's more of a check mark. So as we continue working through this IAP, if we identify a metric, we will be providing that to you. The fourth one is looking at athletic fields and retrofitting them with synthetic turf, specifically at Wicker Park and Cannon Park. And so as of right now, this is the one that's marked in progress and on schedule. And Field Turf USA was selected to provide the initial design and construction, and that it should be underway. Design is still underway as of 10/21, so at the time of the identification, I believe that's still moving forward. I don't know if Mark is behind me on that one. One of the ways that we measure that one is around resident satisfaction with the quality of parks. In 2022, it was 99% with a goal of 95%. And then finally, last but not least, is to expand and renovate the Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives. And this is a continuation and an addition to the IEP that ended last year when we absorbed the library and archives. It's currently we're currently in the process of selecting and negotiating and executing a contract. And I believe that has actually it's either been completed as of Q2 or it's still in the process. I apologize, I don't want to speak out of turn on that.
Both.
I think it's still in process.
Still in the process. And so that's why it's in progress, not on schedule, again, based off of the task list associated with that. And we did provide 2 new satisfaction ratings as a part of the annual community survey around resident satisfaction with both library and archive services. And you can see those are at 95% and 98%, so meeting our goal.
I've got a question on those.
Yes, sir.
Because I went back and read the community survey. And library or the archives. According to the community survey, 60% of our residents have not used the library in the past year. So for us to put there that 95% are satisfied, it strikes me as a little disingenuous. I mean, if I didn't go back and look at this, because I saw that 95% number and I thought I'd read something in the past, I'm very satisfied with the library. I like going there. But I don't, there's something of a disconnect when 60% don't visit it, but 95% of our residents are satisfied. Either we need to clarify that or we need to do something there.
So the question in the community survey asks residents who respond whether or not they've used library services or archive services within the past year. If they chose yes, then the next question they were asked to respond to was, what was your satisfaction with the services in which you received from the library and the archive services? Because we're specifically asking for the services that were provided to the members and the residents that were there. And so we asked that question to segment out those, because if you have not received those services, you would not be able to provide that whether or not you were satisfied with the services that you did not receive.
All right, let's carry that downstream. If only 1% of our residents were using something and they were totally satisfied with that function, the library, the parks, whatever, would it be sort of fair to say that 100% of the residents are satisfied
I would
with
say
the
that
services? I mean, that's where I'm headed. There's a disconnect, as I said.
I would say that 100% of residents who use the services at the library, 95% of residents who use library services were satisfied with the services that were rendered.
That would be, I would support that addition
Okay.
to that,
Yes, sir.
because that is misleading.
That's true for emergency services and
Parks
fire
and
services
everything.
and everything. Not everybody has to.
Everything.
But I think we're leaving, it's the impression we're leaving, even amongst ourselves. We're saying it's 100%, it's 99%, but when you drill down on the numbers, it's not exactly that. And I just don't think we're being fair to the taxpayers, to ourselves about that. That's the data. The data is that a majority don't use a certain service.
I think you brought clarity to it, though. You identified that, and Matt answered the question.
I agree.
It's
That's why I was-
clear. So if they use it, 95% of them are satisfied. How many are using it? We don't have that information. We can drill into that, I'm sure, and get that. On the fire stuff, I doubt that you have to have a fire to determine whether you like the firemen or not. Again, this is a survey. Let's keep it in perspective.
Any other-
Any other
questions?
questions? Sorry, around the IAPs?
Sorry?
I was just asking if there were any further questions on IEPs before I moved on.
I don't think so.
So the other items that we looked at are OFIs, or opportunities for improvement. And so we break this out based off of, or specifically for these quarterly updates around those that are associated with strategic opportunities that we've identified within the FY23 Strategic Operating Plan. So the first page, and I believe it's actually the first 2 pages here, you're actually going to see any of them that go within fiscal year '23. And I've provided an update for you here on each of those items, and I'm happy to dive deeper into any of those or provide any context for you or answer any questions that you all may have. In general, 8 of them are on track, and 3 of them have not yet started as of the end of Q1.
Remind me of the evaluation, the word evaluation versus the word IAP in the OFI column. What is that telling us?
So the IAP are those larger projects, the initiative action plan items that were on the previous page. OFIs can fall though within evaluations or projects. So evaluations are essentially, are we evaluating, as you can see, just as an example here, evaluate the viability of potential fair barn enhancements. There's no project associated with that as a part of the OFI. We're evaluating whether or not there are enhancements or improvements that could be made for the fair barn. And that's what the fiscal year '23 is focused on.
Another way to look at that is that we do evaluations to determine whether or not we are going to pursue a future IAP or a project.
Okay.
Matt, we look at this list again in our retreat, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I had just two things stood out to me. Evaluate viability of potential fair barn enhancements or improvements. I don't remember that one. What did that contemplate? Do you remember?
When are you at?
It's midway, evaluate the
Yeah.
viability.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first
Evaluation,
evaluation.
the first evaluation.
Do we recall what that entails, envisions?
Yes, so there were, and it says, a meeting held with performance director, so I had to take a moment to remember the meeting myself. So I can't remember exactly the conversation at the time in which we set out this list within the retreats last year, but I can provide you that there have been conversations about different enhancement opportunities around the venue itself that exist that has been identified as potential areas to help with, again, either wedding venues or other types of attractions to the fair barn as a venue itself. And so that's where this is coming from. And so right now, we're looking at whether or not the potential opportunities that exist there could, as to Jeff's point, lead to a potential project to come forward to you all during the retreat.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I think one of those, for example, is the fact that the ceiling has windows, windows there, and that creates light during the day that affects issues related to presentations that are going on screens, things like that. I think that was one of the thoughts.
Yeah, I think it was things like stages, lighting. I
Stage,
think
yeah.
there was also a discussion about expanded dressing room facilities.
Yes. Like, I believe there was also something around, picture opportunities for, again, just using weddings as an example about other ways in which to help the venue become more competitive when it comes to opportunities that may exist for those kinds of venues.
Okay. I had one more. Two below that, create a highway corridor overlay ordinance. And I thought highway corridor overlay was a county thing. Is that a municipal? It is municipal. Okay. So what is it that the county does that we,
It's both.
okay.
Their ordinance, their highway corridor overlay does not pertain or regulate what happens within the village limits.
You probably understand this better than I do, don't you, Jane? The highway corridor overlay. My guess is you understand this better than I do. I just read that and thought it was a county thing because I know the county was being pushed to do something.
So the 211, okay, as it goes past Pine Wild, the northern,
County.
the lots that are on the north side are in the county, but the lots that are on the south side are in Pine Wild in the Pinehurst Village limits. So the county's zoning ordinance
Fix.
pertains to the north side of 211, but not to the south side.
So we can protect the south side through highway, corridor overlay. Okay.
Right. Right.
That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Lydia.
Moving on to the next page. And again, this is just further the continuation of the list of the 11 OFEs and IAPs that start sometime within fiscal year '23, and that you'll be continuing to get updates throughout the year.
Recognize all those.
Moving on to the last page here. There's not too much to identify yet on this one for conversation, but we're happy to talk about anything that you may have. This just shows that within the retreat, there are certain OFEs or opportunities for improvement, as well as initiative action plan items that will be starting in the out years. So 24 through 27 is the current list. And so this is showing where the current timeline is for each one. And as the year goes on, we'll start filling in information and notes, especially as those items that start coming closer to FY24 or after the retreat. Once we start to talk about what those items may be, there'll be some notes provided in this, probably starting into Q2 and Q3. But I'm happy to answer any questions you may have now.
Any other comments or questions for Matt? None. Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
We'll be working more with you in the first week of December, I think it is, and before that. Thank you. Jeff Sanborn, we'll move on to item number 11. Any council members have other business to raise tonight? Yes, no?
I had a couple items. I had an inquiry from a resident. So this is sort of a heads up for us as a village regarding our schedule of fees that we place on citizens and developers and so forth. And the question I think was more of a comparison question. In other words, how does the village of Pinehurst stand up versus the rest of the communities in the state of North Carolina vis-a-vis what we are charging residents and developers and so forth? So as staff may know this at their fingertips, or they may have to contact somebody to get some research, but I think it'll be worthwhile because I think we're going to be getting some more questions like that as the year goes on, particularly as the small area plan and Village Place moves forward.
We did that recently, and we did it when we last updated our planning and inspections fees. And it's helpful reference information, but at the end of the day, we statutorily can only charge planning and zoning fees that are commensurate with the value of the service that we provide in terms of what the cost is to the village. So what we really did was we did the analysis on what it costs the village to
And then we pass it on.
provide those services, and then we showed that information in relation to what some other communities provide. At least that's my recollection, but we can bring that back
That'd be great.
for review.
Second item I wanted to bring up is, and it's related to what both you and I mentioned at the beginning, was that on the encouraging residents to volunteer for our advisory committees. I do think we ought to visit the process, because there seems to be a small flurry of people who are leaving some committees, and so we're going to be faced with filling these. And so the process we go through to fill them, I think it would be worthwhile for us to have some sort of discussion as a council. That's all.
Thank you.
And third, well, this was an interesting one. It was brought to my attention a while ago, and then it resurfaced because I read an article in the newspaper. And it had to do with the schools and the districting of where kids go to their local community public school. I was surprised to learn that parts of the village of Pinehurst residents are not included in the Pinehurst Elementary School District. I didn't know that, I found out. And in the paper summarizing the recent school board elections, there was a comment about visiting the redistricting issue of the community. If that's going to actually take place, I'd like us to think about whether or not we should make an effort to keep Pinehurst intact as far as the ability of residents to send their children to the Pinehurst Elementary School. I may have opened up a can of worms, but I don't mind that, because to me, the surprise of finding out when a resident called me that they thought their kid was going to go to this school and they're going to go somewhere else, caught me off guard. So we can discuss it at another point. And
Hot potato.
hot potato, that's fine. I like my potatoes hot. Okay.
That's a can of worms.
Can of worms, too. A hot potato and a can of worms.
It's a can of worms, well, I won't, that's not a helpful phrase. It's a complicated issue that has many very strong opinions, obviously. But also keep in mind, Pat, as we hear from the school board now and into the future on this issue and others, geography plays an important role in the satisfaction of a family as to where their child goes to elementary school. Let's just take that as an example.
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
Because people in the Lake District of Pinehurst and down on the west side of town would much prefer, and their kids do go to West End Elementary as opposed to Pinehurst Elementary, because you've got a geography situation there for them. But looking into school districts and how that works in communities is something that people who move to town often need to look at.
Right, okay.
As in all towns in America, I think, except very small. Okay.
And one of the things that we, in the last redistricting round that the school system went through, one of the big points that we tried to make, and I think we made successfully, was for them to make an effort to draw the lines in ways that minimize traffic in key congestion points.
That's also,
That's
yes.
another
that is
consideration.
true. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I look forward to the discussion, like I said.
Lydia?
News to me.
One question. Have we heard anything from the Park Service about the condition and integrity study?
Interesting you would ask.
Oh, I guess there's an
Yeah,
answer.
but I
Yesterday-
haven't read it yet.
Yesterday, yes. Yesterday, I received a message that the final report is almost done, or is done, and they're looking for a date in early February to make a presentation here. Haven't seen any of the details yet. Jeff and I got this note, and we're kind of corresponding on timing for that. But it looks like in February, that report will be available. I think before that, Lydia, but it isn't in our hands at this time.
The end is in sight, maybe, hopefully.
Okay. So yes, that'll be coming back to us. All right, I think we're finished then with other business, which would move us to comments from attendees, and I think we have a list here. I have 4 individuals who have signed up, and if it's council's will, we'll take comments from others who may not have signed up if they wish to do so. There are 4 individuals, as I said. The first person is Jim Nash, followed by Linda Goldhammer. Jim Nash.
Thank you. Always good to be first.
Hi, Jim. Yeah, raise that up. You're too tall for us.
How about up here?
There you go.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, my comments tonight are directed to the 2022 business survey results. And I want to question whether the survey was statistically valid. Now, I picked up some additional information listening to the presentation tonight, so I had to do a lot of quick editing to what I was going to say, so it might not be quite as smooth as I had planned. But on October 4th, I addressed my concern to administration that I had heard the survey only went out to a random group of businesses, not all businesses. And I was given a prompt reply that our annual business survey is mailed to all businesses. Sitting here tonight with me is the president of Pinehurst Business Partners, who states that she didn't receive a survey this year, nor has she received a survey for the last few years. I actually had to request my survey. It wasn't automatically sent to me. We learned tonight that the survey went out to 420 businesses. The B2B Yellow Pages for Pinehurst lists approximately 1,090 businesses. So that's a 700 or 670 business discrepancy. So that's not all the businesses. So of this 420 businesses that it was sent to, that represents 17.9% return. So my question is that really statistically valid? And I think Pat asked that same question a little bit differently. We also need to know why it was not then sent to all Pinehurst businesses as stated by administration, and it was also stated in the copy of the survey that it was sent to all Pinehurst businesses, which it doesn't appear that it was. Checkmarket is a major online survey platform with a prestigious client list worldwide, and they explain on their website what's statistically valid for survey results. Many factors come into play. However, a baseline metric is the smaller the sample segment, the larger the percentage participation required to be statistically valid. They have an online calculator tool for sample size, which shows you the number of respondents you need to obtain statistically significant results for a specific population, in our case, a business population. So as an example, if we use the 420 demographic of business population and a 5% margin of error with a 95% confidence level, which is what they suggest, the required sample size would need to be 201, not 75. If it was sent to all 1,090 businesses, you would need 285. Furthermore, of the 75 respondents, only 25.7% or 19 were located in the village center, downtown. Thus, the downtown survey outcomes are skewed by the 75% majority outside of downtown. I and others would like to see the statistical results of the business survey for just the village central area, downtown, if they can break that out, that segment. I assure you the results would be dramatically different. The 345 non-respondents to the survey potentially represents a considerable percentage of businesses that are just too apathetic to respond any longer. And I know this to be a fact with many. Somehow we need to follow up and see if this, in fact, is the case. As all of you know, on October 3rd, I questioned the credibility of the survey contractor as my invitation to take the business survey came in the form of a text message from some unidentified, nondescript click-through link associated with Google reports of scams associated with that number. VOP administration and the survey facilitator assured me that the subcontractor was legitimate. If a third-party contractor allows subcontractors with a suspect record to continue to be part of their business, it's time to change that relationship. So I do question the validity of the survey results presented tonight. I had about probably 10 minutes of comments that I wanted to make, but with the 3-minute time limit, I will address the rest of them in a memorandum. I was prepared to give that tonight, but now with the new statistics that were presented, I'm going to go back and change a few things, and I'll mail that to each one of you.
Thank you, Jim.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Jim, thank you for working on that, and we'll look forward to getting your information and taking that up with village staff. The next speaker is Lynn Goldhammer, followed by Elizabeth Hurt, 65 Pine Valley. Lynn Goldhammer, please.
Good evening. I signed up just so if something came to mind, I could go ahead and speak. So basically, two things kind of came to mind just from listening to things today. One, I'm glad to hear you questioning the survey. I'm not part of a business thing, but one thing that struck me is when you only have about 20% return, something isn't working so well with that. But also, having done written surveys, usually if you go much more than one page, people don't want to participate. And listening to these different questions, it was basically came down to, are you happy here? And, you know, they are, because they're still here. But I didn't see there was any opportunity for subjective answers, and maybe they did have that and collected it somewhere else. But something like, if you weren't happy with feeling safe here, why? We're not getting that kind of information in this survey. And you can write surveys where they have it very quantitative, you know, scale of 1 to 5, but there's also, you can put in some places for, even if it's just at the end, what are you most pleased about and what are you most displeased about? Something like that, so you have some ideas like, where do you go with this information? So anyway, I'm glad that you're looking at that because it is a very, very long survey, it seems, and I think the lack of participation is a reflection of that. My other thing that I had a question of is you mentioned partners in progress. And I've seen in the past where someone's, you know, supposed to be the, I don't know, connecting person to that, but I never see much of information put out about who they are, what's their point and purpose. Have we hired them? Are we paying them? So I was just wondering if someone can kind of let us know more about this entity out there and what is their point and purpose? Is that...
We don't usually respond to those questions, but I can tell you that if you Google Partners in Progress, it is the Moore County Economic Development Authority.
Okay.
And the partnership comes from the fact that there are a variety of individuals who kind of sit on the board, including village government, Southern Pines, Aberdeen, Pinehurst, to guide that structure.
Do the towns pay them? Is that how they
Yes,
stay in
we
business?
do.
So you do
Everybody
pay
pays a
them.
fee to do that, yes.
I was curious about it because when I became aware of them, like I moved here 8 years ago, shortly after that, when I heard of them, I looked them up, and it listed their members. The next time I looked it up, that was completely scrubbed, and they weren't telling who their members were, and that seemed a little bit strange. And I've heard of certain things like this being installed across America, and their intentions aren't so much how to help we the people, but more how to progress us into a direction that the people who live here never said they wanted to go in. And it kind of makes me a little worried about why do we have them if we need them, and if what they're doing is aligned with what we, the taxpayer people, even want here. Maybe, I think one thing I would like to see is could we get a presentation from them or something, especially now that we know that our tax dollars are paying for them.
Happy to think about that, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Elizabeth, and I'm sorry, I can't,
My handwriting's really messy.
so the
It's
correct
Kent.
spelling of your last name is?
Kent.
As-
Superman, Kent. Clark Kent. Kent.
Please, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for addressing the lighting issue. That's really what I wanted to talk about, the reindeer.
Could you speak just a little closer to the microphone? Everybody
Okay.
hear you great.
Can you hear me
Thank you
now?
much. Thank you.
I don't know if everybody has seen it. I think if you haven't seen it, it's important to see it. You're invited to my house, 65 Pine Valley, to look at it. It is a 7-foot light LED, I know you've seen it, lighted reindeer. And because it's not elevated like tennis courts light would be, it doesn't just come down on the ground. In my house, it goes through the windows into my living room, out the front of my house, into our bedroom, into our den, into our kitchen, and into our dining area, because it comes straight into the, straight in, not down. So not only does it make our decks not very usable after sunset, but it's in our house and in our bedrooms, but 10 o'clock would take care of that. The other thing that I have been looking at is there is a ordinance in Asheville and in Durham of 0.5 and 0.75 foot candles. I went out last night and just took a foot candle reading of the reindeer from the next door neighbor, and it was 8.2. So that's 16 times more than any ordinance that I could find. So I'm asking that you guys think about how light that thing is, because it's amazing. And again, please, if you want to come over and look at it, come in my living room. I'll give you a little tea, a little wine, whatever you want, and look at this thing, because it's invasive. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Bob Meerman?
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the council for your speedy response to our petition to address this lighting issue. We've been impressed with your responsiveness, and I know several of you have come over and taken a look at the issue that we have, and I appreciate that, as we all appreciate that. Our 8 families are affected by it every night. Earlier in your presentation here, you showed a copy of the proposed ordinance, and as part of that, you listed 5 things that are appropriate. And they should be. There's safety issues, there are home lighting issues, and those are the appropriate things. So by definition, if those are the appropriate things, then everything else is inappropriate. And the inappropriate part, I think, is germane to the time. Because if a lighting issue is inappropriate at 10 o'clock or thereafter, it's also inappropriate whenever it's dark. And if it gets dark right after sunset, it's just as inappropriate at 8 o'clock as it is at 10. Our response is, and our suggestion is, that 10 o'clock is an arbitrary number. Now, I recognize from what you were saying earlier that 10 o'clock has been used for sound, and I understand that. People have parties and they have entertainment, and at 10 o'clock, that should cease to be an issue for the neighbors. Lighting starts to be an issue as soon as it gets dark. It doesn't start at 10 o'clock. For us, it starts right after sunset, when we're trying to have dinner on our decks, and it affects us. So I'd like you to reconsider your process about the 10 o'clock as being the issue. The other thing is the Durham, I think I sent copies of that Durham set of criteria out to you. And I would suggest, again, in light of what you were saying tonight, that the intensity issue is a germane factor in this. If you allow lights to go on, let's say from before 10 o'clock, anything that's inappropriate should be up to a certain set of criteria, that it shouldn't be above a certain intensity. And whether it's foot candles or lumens, that has yet to be decided, and I'll leave it up to you to make the decision. And the Durham ordinance is based on foot candles, and in our situation, as we just heard, it's 16 times as bright as the Durham standard. Finally, one other thing about the survey, and I'll switch gears here. I've started in 1980, I started a survey company that is now an international survey company. So let me just add one piece of information to your, for the points that were made earlier about the inaccuracy or the invalidity of the survey. And that's just one thing I want to mention. You have a 5-point scale. The midpoint of that scale is neutral. That is not a person who is satisfied. What you're getting is a false positive on your perspective. The numbers you saw here tonight contain a lot of false positives. It's like you're congratulating yourselves, and I can take any survey response, any set of data, and make it look good or bad, depending on how I present it. Tonight, it was presented in what I consider to be an illogical manner because of the neutral point. It should be the top. If you have a 5-point scale, it should be the top box, which is the 5 and the 4, not the 3. The 3 is not a satisfied person. You can make yourself look good if you take the 3 in there, but your scores are all going to be in the high 90s then. And as you pointed out, Lydia, why are we doing this every year? The same scores are coming in. It's predictable. Do it every other year and take a closer look at the way it's being presented. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other persons who wish to speak to the village council tonight? Seeing none, we move to the last item of business, which is motion to adjourn the regular meeting and move to our work session. Is there a motion, please?
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
That's a motion by Pat Pizzella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff Morgan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. We'll move to a work session at 7:15. Take a 10-minute short break and reconvene right here.